Hello and welcome aboard the Talkin Texans YouTube show on the ESPN 97.5 ESPN Houston YouTube channel. I am Paul Gallant, host of the Paul Gallant Show, which you can hear weekdays 10 to noon on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. He is DJ Bieneme, who is the Texans beat reporter for ESPN. DJ, what's going on? We just had our third media available Houston Texans offseason training activity session. What did you see?
Well, it seems like we have I don't use the word legitimate yet because we're not training camp, but it seems that there's going to be somewhat of a quarterback-ish battle. I don't want to go as far to say we're going to have a quarterback battle, but just based on what we've seen in terms of just the rep distributions at the third practice, Davis Mills ran with the ones during 7-on-7 for the entire majority. Then during team, Davis Mills ran with the ones for the first portion. Then on the back half of that portion, CJ ran with the first team. Then for 2 minutes, it was like a minute and 15 seconds. I don't believe they had any timeouts. Davis ran with the ones, CJ ran with the twos. So it sucks that we can't go to back-to-back OTA practices. You just never know what the approach is for that day because coaches always have things they want to specify and work on. But since we're getting them once a week, we can only go off what we see. And then the third one, it's been more of a mini rotation. I'll probably go like 65, 35 Davis to Stroud, where the second OTA was 100 CJ getting the first team reps. And the first OTA was 100 Davis Mills getting the first team reps. So I'm really intrigued to see next week at mandatory minicamp what it looks like. But that was the biggest takeaway, was just the reps distribution amongst the quarterbacks.
I think it's good that they're making CJ Stroud earn it. I feel like he will be able to earn it very easily. Nothing against Davis Mills. It has been noteworthy if you take a look at the transcripts coming out after practice that D'Amico Ryans continues to go out of his way to not mention CJ Stroud individually. We've talked about this before, DJ. They'll bring up Case Keenum, Davis Mills, other rookies. They brought up some guy who I'd never heard of when they were asked about all of the rookies.
Jesse Matthews.
Yes. And good for him. Hey, at least he's making headwaves enough that D'Amico Ryans thought to mention him. So I like that they're doing this. Perhaps it is for show. I think the skeptic out there will probably say, oh, wow, they're really trying to install a new culture and show that there's a new culture, a word they've been obsessed with over the last couple of years. But to their credit, seems like they are actually doing their due diligence on that front as D'Amico Ryans takes over.
Yeah, but it's a waste of time, though. We know CJ's going to be a starter. If you draft a guy that high, he should be ready to play. And at that point, because Anderson is with the starting unit. He's getting the first team reps. So why isn't the guy that was drafted one slot ahead of him not getting the majority of the first team reps? So that's kind of how I look at it. We just saw a report coming out of Carolina where Bryce Young was elevated to number one QB spot. And this is more my perception of quarterbacks are just different in every other position. Not necessarily you have to give them the starting role. I'm not saying that. But your entire career, for the most part, there's some, rare situations where you can miss on the quarterback and be okay. Like I think the Jets are okay now, even though they missed on Zach, and the 49ers missed on, I don't want to use the way they missed on Trey, but they were able to overcome Trey's injuries, and they might have another guy in Brock Purdy. But for the most part, when you draft a quarterback that high, your entire rebuild and organizational stability resides on can he play or not, period. So if you focus everything into his development, and again, when it comes to development, getting them reps with the ones is the best way to develop them. I just don't understand the purpose of delaying the inevitable, Granted, I won't be too critical about that yet because it's still Now it's June. Before we were saying it's only May. No, it's June. So next week, I do want to see is CJ Stroud running with the ones. Let's say it's similar to the last OTA practice. I'll be a little more because again, we know he's going to start. You drafted him that high for a reason. And again, if the Carolina Panthers, who their backup quarterback has way more pedigree, has accomplished way more.
Andy Dalton.
And Andy Dalton in his career than Davis Mills has. And they were like, nah, Andy, you're going to be the 2. This is just what it is. Bryce is going to be the 1. Your job is to get Bryce ready. Why aren't we doing the same for CJ? That's just kind of how I look at it. If we're just – because his development is going to be – if CJ Stroud succeeds, then Miko Ryans will work here for the most part. Unless, the defense stinks or whatever. Like, CJ's really good, but you go 8-8 or 8-9 and things like that. You're just not winning. Then you get canned. But if CJ is not good, D'Amico's gone, the Casario's gone, everybody's gone. So why not start speeding up that maturation process and giving him the reps with the ones and making him practice with guys that he's going to be playing with on game days, throughout training camp, throughout preseason, throughout joint practices, all this. So that's kind of my approach to rip the Band-Aid off and let's get straight to it.
It's an interesting philosophical question. I think some guys are ready for it. I think some guys aren't. Some guys will be ready for it. Some guys never will. As far as never will, I felt like that was a big, big spot to throw Zach Wilson, who was previously the quarterback at BYU, in front of, and you saw it because you were there covering the team, a hungry, knives out New York media. That's a lot. For Stroud, he played at Ohio State. If you've ever interacted with an Ohio State fan, they're effing crazy. They're insane. And he was talking this offseason about how they bring in Quinn Ewers, and he was pissed off about the fact that they brought in this 5-star quarterback that could theoretically threaten him for his job. So from a distractions pressure perspective, that's not something Stroud's going to have to deal with. But there's also arguments in the other way, DJ, where I don't know why people feel this way. I think, honestly, Mahomes would have been fine when he first came into the league. But they see Alex Smith standing in there, and Smith was good. I would say clearly above, like, I guess we call it the Dalton line, the line of quarterbacks where you're like, yeah, he's there, and I would like to do better, but I know I can do worse. Smith was there. Smith took the Chiefs to the playoffs. Smith had some good moments in the playoffs with the 49ers. So you understood why Smith was still the quarterback for that whole year. Then you see Mahomes for the first time, and you're like, he probably could have done this from the get-go. I guess you can go further back and talk about Rodgers being behind Favre. That's a little bit different because Favre was a future Hall of Famer. This is a situation where I'm with you in that it does feel like you're delaying the inevitable for the sake of putting on a show. And the show to us doesn't matter. The show to the rest of the team, though, actually might. But I'm with you in that, like, we all know how this is going to end. And I can understand why you and anybody who's actually out there are like, wait, why is there a split between these two, especially when I think we all have a pretty good idea of Mills and his ceiling in this league.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on, like, the sooner you find out if your quarterback can or can't play, the quicker you can make a decision on what to do. Example with Zach. You mentioned Zach. By the Jets playing him, even though some say he wasn't ready, now hindsight's 2020, but some say he wasn't ready. But now you see he's not an NFL quarterback. You see that. You missed, it's cool. You missed, you're able to build up a good enough roster to entice a guy like Aaron Rodgers to want to come to your team. Cool. You're able to pivot. I remember, Mitchell Trubisky, he didn't start early and he ended up playing. You found out he ain't it. But you found out a little bit later. Later you would have wanted to. You know what I'm saying? Granted, he played a little bit longer, and he had some success, et cetera, et cetera. But my point is you want the guy to play early so you can see, is he the answer? Yes or no. Like, for example, I remember when Tua got inserted into the starting lineup. I believe it was against the Rams. It was week 6. The Dolphins just beat the Jets. They were 3-3 going to play the Rams, and the offense was starting to click. They basically had 2 good they actually had, I think, 3 good games. They beat the Niners, they beat the Jets, and they beat the Jaguars. They beat all 3 of them. I think they crushed all 3 of them. But they inserted Tua because they basically want to see what does this guy have so we can know what we want to do going forward. And clearly, due to all the reports, Brian Flores, they didn't believe in Tua, and he found that out by playing him. And I think that's what matters for me the most is play the guy so you can see, is he your guy, period. Granted, it's early. We're talking more down the line ordeal. Now, obviously, if it's week 2 or 3 and Davis Mills is starting and CJ hasn't taken any snaps, now we're having a completely different discussion. But for me, it's always about let's rip the Band-Aid off and let's get straight to it, man. Because, again,
yeah. The quicker you learn, the quicker you can move on. Right. To your point a little bit earlier, if this doesn't go well with CJ Stroud, Casario's definitely gone. We'll see with DeMeco Ryans. But if DeMeco Ryans figures out after 2 years or something like that like this ain't the guy, you can take a look at fallback plans. And I think teams are getting a little bit quicker with that. Because back in the day, you draft a quarterback in the first round, you got to pay him that ridiculous contract before the rookie wage scale came in.
Yep, great point.
You couldn't move on. Now it's totally different. And I'm not saying that CJ Stroud's not going to work out, but I'm with you in that. The sooner you figure it out, the better. And I think now you don't need to sit behind for a couple of years. There is old school mentality, I think, that's still prevalent across sports where, you're supposed to sit back. Maybe you used to see it a lot at college football where some guys wouldn't even play their freshman year at all, not even in a gadget kind of role or something like that. But over time, that's changed. And I think that age or inexperience as a deterrent to getting on the field is becoming more and more a thing of the past. And I think the fact that DeMeco Ryans is a younger coach bodes well for the idea that they probably will eventually get to a point where, we're just going to go with Stroud.
Yeah. And I think that's what will happen. Because now I can understand if, like, again, through OTAs, like Davis Mills was like lighting it up. Granted, we've only seen 3 practices, but if he's lighting it up. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't been lighting up. Nah, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, like, from my eyes, it's been pretty comparable between CJ and Davis in terms of just what they've been able to do at practice. Like, we've gotten more explosive plays when CJ's been out there, or whether it's 7-on-7 with deep ball to Nico, or the slant over the middle to Amari Rodgers that went 40 yards and then came back and then put up 10 and then he threw another touchdown pass to Alex Batchman for a touchdown. That was impressive. And then, he had like another, over the middle throw that went for like, a decent amount to a tight end. So we've seen some explosive plays for sure from CJ. But, again, from what I've seen, a lot of it's been more with the second team, against second defenses where Davis is going against the first team defense, which is, I'm not going to lie, the first team defense, secondary-wise, is pretty good. So, like, you have to always put those things in context. But, again, for the most part, they've been pretty comparable. So, if Davis was, like, leaps and bounds better than what CJ was right now, cool. But that's not the case.
Right.
So, as I said, we're kind of delaying the inevitable. And it's not annoying, but if next week they're still doing the charade, it's like, bro, what are we doing?
Yeah, let's just get to the end.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, what are we doing? If it's training camp and we doing the same thing, all right, bro. You know what I mean? Because it's like, we know what's going to happen. And like, the sooner we can get to that point, the sooner CJ can continue, we can accelerate that process. Just so, he's out there, because I don't want to say he needs to be out there week 1, but that's going to be a really good test for him. Week 1, you're going up against the Baltimore Ravens. You need him to get all the reps possible to go against that defense. Because that defense, once they got Raekwon Smith, was a top 3 unit in every single statistical category, advanced or accounting stats. They were top. They almost carried an offense led by Tyler Huntley, who has some talent, but an offense carried by Tyler Huntley to a victory over the Cincinnati Bengals on the road against a team that almost went to the Super Bowl. and that was coming off a Super Bowl appearance the previous year.
I mean,
again, the Bengals almost went to Super Bowl this past year, and they almost carried them to a win over that team. So that's gonna be a good test, and he needs all the reps to get ready for that monster that's gonna be on display week 1.
Wasn't the Ravens defense that gave up that big score by the Bengals too? That was a Bengals defensive touchdown. You know,
come on, man. So that's why I'm like, the sooner we can accelerate this process, the sooner we can stop putting on. Great point. The sooner we can stop putting on this show, the sooner we can all focus on other things instead of the charade of, is it going to be Davis? Is it going to be CJ? We know it's going to be CJ, and I get it. We got the whole competition thing, but man, like, there are players literally actively recruiting Lamar Jackson to come to the Texans. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's cut the charade. Like, let's cut the charade, man.
I'm with you.
Come on.
You mentioned some of those other things that are happening, and I know that you've noticed some good things out of the defense at OTAs.
Yeah.
Everything's in shorts, so everything with a grain of salt. But you like what you've seen, physicality that disrupted the first and second team offense. And we mentioned Derek Stingley last week. Stingley has not been challenged much, which is generally a good sign if a quarterback is going through his progressions properly. Let's start with your observation, DJ, about the physicality of the defense. Where is that coming from? Who in particular stood out to you?
For sure, the defensive line, in the sense that, whenever they do try to run the ball, outside of Dameon Pierce, Dameon Pierce, he'll get his, but there's been a lot of times where there hasn't really been much. But when he does slither through, he does slither through. But on the back end, there just hasn't been as much separation. Like, you're really seeing a lot of most of the quarterbacks, seeing a lot of head movement where it's like 1, 2, or check down. A lot of head movement because they don't know where to go to ball. I think they're trying to go in a specific spot. They just can't get it there because there's just not that much airspace. The secondary of Derek Stingley, Jalen Petrie, Desmond King in the slot. On the outside, the person that's been filling in for Steven Nelson has been Jacoby Francis. And then obviously, Jimmy Ward. Those 5, they've been doing a really good job in the sense of not giving that much room for quarterbacks to throw the ball. So my question comes off of that is, okay, is the receiving core, is that a problem for the receiving core in the sense, okay, is the receiving core just not good enough? But I think it's just good competition both ends. I don't think it's that they're not good enough. I think they make plays when called upon, but they're working. They're making them. The defensive back group is making them work for it. So it's obviously defensive line when it comes to some of the run game, but in the pass game, that secondary has been like not only lights out, but they've been really good, man. They've been really good. I expect them to be good. So this is just they're hitting my expectations. Like, I know they're going to be a good unit. I mean, again, I've seen 3 practices. I've seen Derek Stingley challenge, like, the ball thrown at him once and return it to PBU. Only times, they throw to his side, from what I've seen, is in those 3 practices, is like when they're trying to throw it to the slot. But Derek Stingley, obviously, like, to the slot by the sideline, but usually that's not necessarily Derek Stingley's man. Usually they have a receiver outside clearing out Derek Stingley so they can fit that ball into the window that between the defender and the sideline. Hopefully that receiver's in that vicinity. So, I really like the secondary. Secondary is going to be a top 10 unit. I know I said last time, I don't give me hot takes, but that's my hot take. That the unit is going to be a top 10 unit. Without question, I have full belief in that because they have all the components, right? You have your veterans in Jimmy Ward and Desmond King, along with Steven Nelson, and then you have your very talented young guys on rookie contracts in Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie. So I already know, based off what we saw last year, and then you add in the scheme that they're going to be in, like, they're going to be a top 10 unit. There's no question about that. Only they're not as of injury or I don't know. Like, something unforeseen would have to happen for them not to be a top 10 unit. Like, I would be shocked if they're not a top 10 unit in 2023. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
Writing that down. I like that Jimmy Ward's out there. Yeah. Now, not the biggest deal, but he's a veteran, been around the league. has some familiarity with DeMeco Ryans. I think it's good that he's out there.
Absolutely.
What does it mean other than that? I really don't know, but I like it when veterans show up for the voluntary stuff because it's important, especially when you got a young team.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Again, as I said before, Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson, Desmond King. Like, I just don't know how that's not a top 10 unit, especially when you come off last year. You know, you replaced Jimmy Ward with Jonathan Owens. The secondary only they had more interceptions than touchdowns, 16-15. So, and that scheme isn't necessarily defensive back friendly in terms of making a lot of plays based on like a lot of the coverages. Like the counting numbers aren't going to be in your favor per se, but you know, they were able to still make a lot of plays. And this scheme is going to put them in position to make plays. And we've seen that when you put them in position to make plays, they can make it. Whether it's Jalen Petrie, Desmond King, Jimmy Ward, Derek Stingley, like we've seen it. It's not like where this is. Granted, it's still projection, but at least a lot of our projection are based off of what we've already seen, and we're just kind of fusing two ideologies together, talent and the scheme. So, yeah, they're going to be a top 10 unit. Have no doubt in that. Like, I believe after this season, I believe Jalen Petrie will for sure be a Pro Bowler. I don't have any questions about that. I think he'll be a Pro Bowler. And I also think that at the end of this season, Derek Stingley, like right now, people are like, oh, the Texans should have taken Sauce, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, yes, sure, whatever, hypothetically. But I still will go to my grave saying this. I'm not dead, obviously. I'm here. But yesterday, I thought I was going to die with my stomach flu.
I know. That's what I was about to say. Knock on wood. Find some wood right now. Good.
But that obviously if Sauce was in with the Texans, he would have not had as good of a season he had in New York. Scheme and the players he had around him had a lot to do with that, paired with his immense talent. He's a generational talent. I think at the end of the season, people are going to be like, oh, the Texans, even though they took their thing over Sauce, the Texans that was still a good pick after this season. Based on what I've seen now, based on what I saw last year, and based on DeMeco Ryans coming into the fold, I believe that Jalen Petrie will be a Pro Bowler, and people won't use the fact that the Texans drafted Derek Stingley over Sauce as a negative anymore after 2023.
We got into this conversation by talking about Jimmy Ward's presence and, of course, just talking about the secondary. Jimmy Ward once fought Deandre Hopkins at a Houston Texans training camp practice. I was there for that. I will never forget that. Anyway, he's now on the team. Has us thinking about Deandre Hopkins. This was after we did last week's show. There was a report that Hopkins would be willing to return to the Houston Texans. I guess they had met. I don't get the feeling that the interest was very mutual. A lot of that has to do with some past bad feelings. I would imagine that they're largely between Hopkins and Cal McNair, fair or foul. If you're Hopkins, you're saying you felt like a slave playing for Bob McNair, his dad. I don't know how you put that back in the ball regardless of who's right and who's wrong, you know? So I don't know if Hopkins is gonna end up back with the Texans. I'm curious as to what you're hearing. Do know that on Sunday, DeAndre Hopkins is gonna be in Nashville meeting with the Tennessee Titans, which would be pretty interesting if, once again, there is a Houston Texans wide receiver staying in the AFC South. It was Andre Johnson, who did the whole rounds, except for Jacksonville. He went to the Colts. He went to the Titans after that. Hopkins on the Titans would be, at the very least, very interesting on a Titans team that really, like, trying to think of what would be a draw for Hopkins. Honestly, of all we've heard say this year, this offseason in particular, the lack of state income tax is really the only thing I can think of. Because that roster really looks like they're pressing the reset button. But what are you hearing both about Hopkins here in Houston and about Hopkins potentially in Tennessee?
Yeah, I think the Hopkins Texans thing is unlikely. And I don't think they ever actually met. I don't actually,
interesting. Okay.
My people, I don't think they actually met. I don't know. DeMeco said he hasn't spoken to him. He said that publicly, but yeah, I don't think they met. I think it was Hopkins more trying to drive up his market. Because I'm interested in going to Texans, just so other teams could CJ, maybe he might have a market of some sort, but I think based off of what he said on I Am Athlete podcast with Brandon Marshall, that this is what he's looking for. It just doesn't fit what the Texans have, right? And it's funny that everybody keeps ignoring that he said, "I'm past the point in my career of playing with a young quarterback." Like he said, I'm past that point in my career. The issue for Hop right now is he wants the money, but the teams that he wants to play for that, because he wants the money and wants to go to a contender. You can't have both at this stage, right? Because everybody's already basically used up the majority of their money. So like the Bills can't afford him, the Chiefs can't afford him. So the only way he can go to those teams if he drops his price, but he's not going to. I don't know how much he's willing to drop his price, especially after the Odell Beckham signing, where Odell basically got $15 million flat. I guarantee like he's going to get that no matter what. So that's kind of where my ideology is on that. Obviously, he would help CJ tremendously, or Davis. I think that he'd be great for the Texans. He would give the offense another big time player. But again, based on what he said, it just doesn't seem that likely. And I think him leaking that he'd be interested is just to drive up his market. A lot of people do that all the time. It's smart business to make people think that maybe he does have a bigger market than we thought, and they end up you realize they don't have as much. One thing I realized throughout free agency is a lot of guys don't have a bunch of teams calling them. And most guys have like 2-3 teams, and those guys kind of bidding against each other. Like I'm talking about teams that are truly interested. Well, I mean, interested that they want to put out an offer. Not, yeah, we like your guy. We'll swing back around, but like literally, hey, well, what's your asking price? We want to bring your guy in. I've come to learn that like a lot of guys actually don't have as big of a market as we would all think. I mean, we even saw with Derek Carr, right? When he hit the market, it was basically like a 2-team race. It was the Jets and the Saints for the most part. Same with the Aaron Rodgers. Like Aaron Rodgers, it was basically the Jets, maybe the Raiders, but the Raiders were like, nah, we cool. So like in a lot of situations, guys don't really have as big of a market as we all think, they would.
I think of all the teams that might get him, I think it's the Bills. I think that it's going to have to take the price going down. And I think that Hopkins might reluctantly go there because I do think that, based on when he was here, I know he was a guy that always wanted to play in like international kind of city, New York or Los Angeles or something like that. Like he's more about Paris and London and stuff. I would say that it's good, probably for the Texans to be wary of guys who aren't going to show up to practice. I don't know that Hopkins is all of a sudden going to change his tune on practice for a team that stunk last year, even if D'Amico Ryan is the head coach. And I feel like, and again, we're recording this on Thursday, June 8th. I could end up being completely wrong. But I feel like if Hopkins ever signs with somebody, I feel like if he can't get Odell Beckham Jr. money, there is no way in hell that he wants to show up for another team's training camp, or at least all.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that's the bar. 15, and I can't blame him for wanting $15 million when he's been one of the best receivers this past decade. He's only 30 or 31, whatever the number is. Like he's still, when playing, one of the best receivers in the league. And again, like he missed the first 6 games last year, and he was on pace. If he would have played the entire season, would have had well over 1,000 yards. Like he had like 700 yards, and he only played 11 games. I think, 11 games. Like he can still play. He might be more of a high volume guy where you got to feed him a lot, or some guys you don't have to feed them as much for them to still produce. But again, like there's a very short list of guys that right now are still better than DeAndre Hopkins. He's still a top 10 receiver. So obviously, if he wanted to come to the Texans could get a deal, that'd be great. In theory, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't either. I do think he's better than all the outside on the roster right now. That's not saying that much, but hopefully it will be saying something by the end of the year. The Texans do have mini camp next week. DJ and I will be talking about that in the next episode of the Talkin Texans podcast. Episode 8. Holy crap. This
we're getting old.
7?
We're getting old.
Months, baby.
we're getting old. You know, we're getting real old.
Don't remind me. Someone took a picture of me the other day behind, and I saw the back of my head, and there were so many gray hairs, and I debated hair dye. I debated Coach K, who
You
doesn't
should have
do
did
that.
it. You should have did it. I mean, one of my homeboys, it was his birthday. He spent it in Houston a couple weekends ago. He had gray hair. I could see it. It was real short, but I could see it. I mean, my girlfriend has gray hair. She probably won't me say that, but she has gray hair. Like in the middle of
I
her hair.
like you're saying all these things to make me feel better about
Yeah,
myself.
I want you to feel better. You know what I'm saying? Like, my girlfriend has gray hair. My dog Theo, he has gray hair. He probably has more because he's a Heat fan. And he went to the game last night. So he probably has like a whole set of gray hair now.
Yeah, I think so. Jokic is looking really good. Anyway, he is DAJ, anime. You can follow his work on Twitter for ESPN.com. I'm Bloggalon. Bloggalon Show weekdays, 10 to noon on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 here in Houston. So long, farewell, and have yourselves a wonderful whatever day it is of the week.